Mr. Speaker, it is a great honor and privilege for me to present to this august House and to the people of the Republic of Kenya the first budget of the Kenya Kwanza administration under the...
Order members.
Okay,
Minister, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a great honor and privilege for me to present to this august House and to the people of Kenya the first budget of the Kenya Kwanza administration under the leadership of His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces. I do this in compliance with the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly and Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act of 2012 that requires the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury to make pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures to the national government. This being the first budget following the conclusion of the general election held in August 2022, allow me to congratulate all the honorable members who were re-elected and those who are serving for the first time in this august House. I look forward to working closely with all of you as we implement the bottom-up economic transformation agenda designed to achieve a sustained economic recovery for improved livelihoods for all Kenyans. Before I proceed, Mr. Speaker, allow me to take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to His Excellency, the President for appointing me to the Cabinet Secretary, to the position of the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury and Economic Planning, and entrusting me with the honor of overseeing the management of macroeconomic policy and public financial management for this. Proactively, the Kenya Kwanza government has begun the journey to bring down the cost of living and improve the livelihoods, while at the same time fostering a sustainable, inclusive economic transformation. The government has taken the long-term sustainable approach of subsidizing production of goods instead of consumption to respond to the rising cost of living. In this regard, the government has instituted immediate interventions that are aimed at providing short-term solutions to the high cost of living, while at the same time building a momentum for the long-term economic vibrancy and transformation. Mr. Speaker, the financial year 2023-2024 budget has been prepared against a background of a challenging external and domestic environment. In addition, the COVID-19 pandemic, Kenya has, over the past years, suffered and also a series of devastating negative and persistent shocks that include the worst drought in decades, as well as adverse spillover effects of the conflict in Eastern Europe and a tight global financial market condition. The combination of all these negative and continuing shocks are what we describe as a perfect storm that has confronted this new administration. The extreme climate change events have emerged as key drivers of food security and increased cost of living. Indeed, our people are currently confronted with increasing higher prices of basic foods, commodities, energy, and transport. This calls for urgent and decisive interventions, especially on our supply side, response. Mr. Speaker, we intend to implement the policy priorities within a sustainable fiscal framework. Overall, we have moderated our spending to ensure the value for money and enhanced the revenue mobilization efforts to ensure that our public debt remains on a sustainable path. Prioritization is critical because resources are scarce, thus limiting our capacity and desire to cover everything at once. In this regard, the budgeting process for the priority programs under the bottom-up economic transformation agenda will be managed through a value chain approach. This has ensured that the resources allocated along the value chain are allocated to all the components along the value chain, thereby eliminating duplication of roles, removing any funding gaps, and enhancing efficiency in the use of available budgetary resources. Since the launch of the first product, the Hustler Fund Personal Loan Fund, the government has invested a total of 11 billion shillings. This money has been revolving within the fund, providing low interest rate at 8% per annum, and so far 16.07 million Kenyans, of which 7.1 million are repeat customers, have actually accessed the fund. So far, 30.8 billion has been borrowed from this revolving fund. In addition to borrowing, the fund is designed to encourage savings. To date, 1.5 billion has been saved as a mandatory savings, while Kenya shilling 17 million has been saved on a voluntary basis. We have witnessed a phenomenal growth in the number of transactions that currently stand at 43.5 million transactions. The largest number of the times a single customer borrower has borrowed from the fund is about 50 times, indicating strong traction of the Hustlers Fund. To further empower the medium and small enterprises, the government on 1st June 2023 launched the second product of the Financial Inclusion Fund that is aimed at facilitating Kenyan access funding through groups. This follows the phenomenal success of the personal loans products under this initiative, and this will allow lending groups such as chamas and SACCOs and SACCOs. The groups can now borrow loans from between 20,000 shillings to 1 million shillings. Let me turn to domestic economy. Mr. Speaker, on the domestic scene, the economic growth for 2022 slowed down to 4.8% from 7.6% in 2021 due to adverse impact of the multiple shocks that affected the economy. Kenya's growth in 2022 was supported by growth in the services sector, while the agricultural sector contracted for the second consecutive year due to the prolonged drought effects, but that also contributed to a slowdown in the growth of manufacturing sector, as well as that of wholesale and retail trade sectors. Mr. Speaker, the economy is expected to rebound and expand by 5.5% in 2023, up from 4.8% in 2022. And it is supposed to maintain that pace of the medium term. The growth will be supported by a broad-based private sector-led growth, including continued strong performance of the services sector and the recovery from the agricultural sector due to improved weather conditions during the March-May rainy season. This growth outlook will be reinforced by interventions being implemented by the government under the bottom-up economic transformation agenda that include the provision of subsidized fertilizer and seeds to farmers during the planting season. Further, economic activity is expected to improve and drive aggregate demand expansion as the international community, international commodity prices is coupled with improved exports and resilient private sector consumption, as well as the ongoing public-private investments. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to support economic recovery by pursuing prudent macroeconomic policies geared towards reducing debt vulnerabilities and supporting sustainable and inclusive development.
Take us through what Kenyans should expect today.
Thank you very much. And that's a very difficult question to ask what Kenyans can expect. But let me say, the whole issue of budget process or budget making process is actually to come up with policies that are geared towards revitalizing the economy. And right now, the new administration has taken over. Taken over the economy, which has been really affected by multiple shocks. So, in a sense, economic activity has been affected by multiple shocks. Cost of living has been rising. And there are so many other issues that are affecting us, especially coming from climate change. We have seen that food security and climate change has become very, very important, and that is what explains why cost of living, and especially for food, has become problematic. So the next question is, what kind of policy package is the government going to produce to make sure that they reflect what the economy is going to do, or how to drive the economy in the next period? That is essentially the process, the whole objective. So in a sense, then the next question is, what would Kenyans expect? The whole issue is that Kenyans expect to see the results of their consultation process. Where did we start? We started by developing a budget policy statement way back in March. That budget policy statement was actually a culmination of public participation. So what we presented to the National Assembly is the results of our own policy outturn and what we anticipate should be done, plus public participation. Then subsequently, the National Assembly also conducted its own public participation, especially now having even moving forward towards the policy propositions, the tax measures, the revenue measures, as well as the expenditure measures. So first of all, we have the expenditure measures, then we have the revenue measures, and then we deal with where do you raise that revenue. And again, Kenyans have made contributions in terms of that. So in a sense, what we are presenting is a culmination of what has been public participation, what has been the synthesis from our policy point of view, and what has the National Assembly specific committees, a budget and appropriation committee, as well as finance and planning committee, what they have also synthesized from the public and what we have synthesized together. So what we are saying is actually a synthesis of what the public has given us. The starting point is that we have laid down the propositions, we have asked for public participation. The next thing is we have presented it in Parliament after the synthesis. The Parliament has gone through a public participation and synthesized, and then we have sat together and said, this is the direction to take. So it means that what you see is a synthesized report. But what is the bottom line? The bottom line is, how do you turn around the economy? That is the bottom line. So the policy measures is, how do you turn around the economy? How do you make this economy inclusive in terms of its growth prospects? How do we create jobs for the youth? How do we lower the cost of living? And how do we create a momentum for future growth? That is the outturn of this, and that is the expectations. I think the most important thing is to understand that we're planning for the next 1 year, but we are providing adequate measures in terms of how we can sustain the momentum for growth so that we get an inclusive growth outcome. And that inclusive growth outcome means we are going to solve the problems where we started. This administration started with two extreme problems. The first one was financing constraints. You cannot finance development because you have no resources. And the second extreme is that you didn't have headroom for debt. So for us, we are actually saying, how do we resolve those two constraints? No headroom for debt. So in a sense, we have to ask ourselves, how do we raise domestic resources in a way that is going to sustain economic turnaround? Because economic turnaround is very, very important for everyone. The second thing is that once you achieve the turnaround, how do you create that momentum for sustainability? And that is also very, very important. So we look at short-term policies, we look at medium-term policies, and we look at long-term policies. And the long-term policies is to make sure that public policy works. That is poverty reduction. We have to create jobs for the youth. We have to make sure that the economy is sustainable in terms inclusive and sustainable. But more importantly, what has hit us very hard is the drought, which we haven't seen for the last 40 years. So the question we're asking ourselves is that how do we make sure that we don't have a repeat of that? So food security and climate change will become a focal point in terms of our planning. And that is what one of the things is to ask, what measures are we going to perfect in this case, so that food security and climate change becomes part of our core planning processes, but also investment. And that for us is very critical. That is the anticipation, but for us it cannot be summarized by one sentence. It is a whole raft of policies which are proposed, which are going to be implemented, and for sure what we are going to see is a resolve in terms of the short-term constraints that we have, but also create a momentum for
the constraints that the country is currently undergoing, the shocks that were there before, what you found in office when you came in. A lot of Kenyans have raised concerns about some of the measures that you've put in place to fund this budget. Maybe is there a balance where Kenyans can feel not constrained so that they can contribute more towards revenue collections and also balance the shocks that are already there?
All the measures that are going to be proposed will be justified and balanced. They have come from consultations. So we do not believe that there are measures that are not going to be balanced or justified. The most important thing is to ask ourselves, where are we going? We have to have some short-term sacrifices for us to achieve the long-term. That is an important component that you really need to worry about. If we want to get away from the constraints that we have faced in the last 1 year or so, then we have to sacrifice for that future. That is the important message I want to tell you. Thank you.
As I come to the penultimate part of this video, in case if you're watching me for the very first time, kindly just consider hitting on the subscribe button. If you've been watching my videos and you've not subscribed, kindly do consider hitting on the subscribe button. And more so, if you're watching me from a different platform, either Telegram, TikTok or Facebook, kindly just head on over to YouTube, search for Mohamed Sudi. I'll be the first right person to pop up. If matters socio-economic and political matters are your great areas of concern, kindly do consider hitting on the subscribe button so that each and every time that I upload a new video, it will automatically reflect on your notification panel. And by so doing, you'll simply be supporting my content. Thank you, and may God bless you.